Hey guys, Clarrisani here. It's been quite a while. I had been aiming to do videos once a week, but unfortunately life happens, especially when you're a mother. I have a 4-year-old who gets sick. So it's good to see you all again, and happy Mother's Day to all the mums out there and to all the people who are filling the roles of being the parent or being the mother. So I've got a few things I want to touch on in this video, and probably an update of what I'm going to be planning to do in the future. So just to begin with, I am hoping, I almost did a video on Friday, and I'm planning on doing a video soon about what is going on with the Aboriginal adoption at the moment. Basically, I want to talk about the stolen generation and the what people are calling the forgotten generation. And yes, they are two very different things, and the controversy around them and what the reality of the situation is right now. Because what recently, and why I nearly made a video on Friday, is that foster parents who managed to successfully adopt a brother and sister after a lot of fighting, Aboriginal brother and sister, nearly lost the 2-year-old to a distant relative in another state. So the younger sister was nearly taken away from the older siblings in an effort to keep the family together. And luckily the appeal was launched and it is being looked into, but Saturday the youngest sibling was almost removed from their brother and sister, and I really want to do a video on what is going on with the forgotten generation and the fact that it is legitimate and there needs to be discussion about this. Now, other things I want to hit on that I've got my little list here. I do want to get a little bit political, people are going to comment here. I've got to talk about the Myammar, or Burma as it used to be called. Now, why I want to address it is because that Nine Network here in Australia was recently running competitions and advertising to go travel through Myanmar, despite the fact that there is actually a travel ban on a lot of the area, and the fact that there is a massive travel warning on that country. So we had one of our commercial networks here in Australia advertising and putting a competition up to travel across a country where it is recommended you don't go. Now, why can't you go? Well, because of the fact you've got the military and government situation, and the fact you've got the ethnic cleansing going on. Now, it is ethnic cleansing. Now, if you don't know what it is, the Rohingya Muslims are basically being massacred. They're being run out of their towns. Their villages are being razed to the ground. There's rape, there's murder, it's just appalling what's going on. And what's going to make this a little bit political is the fact that this is not the first time we've seen this in history. Now, what do I mean by that? Well, this, interesting coming up with the date, is exactly what happened to the Arabs, the Muslims and Christians and the Samaritans, when the Zionists captured large portions of Palestine to become Israel. That is, there were massacres, and these people were run out of their villages, and international law says that, and then I should say, these villages were razed to the ground. They actually put a forest up on these villages, and they bulldozed large areas. And heck, most recently in '67, after the war, they bulldozed an entire community, an entire quarter of Jerusalem, to build the plaza. It was a 770-year-old community, the Moroccan Quarter, and they flattened it, gave the people 2 to 3 days to get out, and then they flattened it, which is against international law. And like I said, they'd only captured it, and within days of capturing Jerusalem, they flattened this area to build the plaza. So basically they paved paradise and put up a parking lot, you could say. So it's nothing new. We've seen it before, and it primarily happens to Muslims. Because people keep forgetting that Muslims are actually the number one target of terrorism in the world. They are dying and being killed by terrorists at rates more than any other group. And on that topic of Muslims, the European colony won Eurovision. European colony, which won? Israel. It is a European colony. It was a group of Europeans that took over and settled Israel. Now, this is interesting that this is happening, given that we right now have the protests going on there. We've got the March for Return, or Protest for Return. Now, what do they mean? It means that international law says that once a conflict ends, the people and communities who were forced out of their homes, by law, must be allowed to return to their homes. This is by law, international law. And since 1947-48, the Zionists have not allowed these people to return to their homes. I mean, a lot of these people still have the keys to these houses. A lot of these houses aren't there. But basically, these people got run out of their houses, and the Zionists moved into the houses. They moved into communities that were vacated, and they didn't bulldoze them. They moved into them. They took everything. They took over the business. I mean, and of course, you've got the port city of Jaffa, which they renamed to Tel Aviv, and they bulldozed most of that and rebuilt it. So you have that, and at the moment there are currently 50 Palestinians have been killed in these protests. We've got footage of even people praying being shot. There was one man who was in his field over a kilometre away from the border who was shot with a tank. He was picking crops, and he was shot by a tank from over a kilometre away. And we have had at least 5 journalists, 5 members of the media shot and 1 killed, despite the fact they were wearing clear vests saying who they were press, and the snipers were targeting them. So we've got that going on. And then on top of that, we have got Israel pretty much dead set on starting World War III. What do I mean by that? Well, for the past few months, Israel has been, particularly in April, targeting Iran in attacks in Syria. They've basically been hitting Iran over and over and over again. Iran has not had to go back at them, but within hours of Trump pulling out of the Iranian deal, or should I say violating the Iranian deal, Israel hit them again, and now Iran's doesn't have to hold back anymore. So they went in and they hit Israeli targets in Syria. So where Israel had set up some of their locations in response to the fact that about 15 Iranians have been killed in Syria recently, Iran hit back. Now people are going to say, I've heard people say, but didn't Iran attack first? No. And didn't Iran attack Israel in Israel? No, because the Golan Heights is actually part of Syria, but it's occupied the same way that the West Bank is occupied. So Golan Heights is actually part of Syria, and it actually has quite a large population of Palestinian refugees. So we've got that going on. And of course, Israel wants to go to war with Iran. Iran's propped up by Russia. It's going to it's going to cause World War III, because not only does Israel want Iran hit, but Saudi Arabia wants Iran hit. They see that place as a threat to them. Why? Because it's quasi-democratic, and because they're a different type of Muslim. Saudi Arabia's Wahhabi. Who are the Wahhabi? They are hardline extremists. They are actually funding all the terrorist groups. Israel, of course, is Zionist. They are also hardline extremists. I'm not saying the people, by the way, on neither side. I'm not saying the people of Saudi Arabia. I'm saying the governments. Israel has also been funding terrorist groups. I mean, Israel's run by a terrorist group, Likud is Erdogan, two names on. So you've got that going on. And, of course, America is propping up Al-Qaeda in Syria. You don't believe me? Look into it. And, of course, Russia's in there standing by the democratically elected government of Syria. So we've got that going on. And that's just two of the things. So, and then you got the protests coming up in Palestine with America stupidly moving their embassy out of the capital of Tel Aviv into the contested city of Jerusalem. And you've also got, of course, there's just been new raids on, what's it called? I wrote it down, but I forgot. The Alaska Mosque. There's just been raids on the mosque. Al-Harim al-Sharif. The extremists and Zionists have been breaking in and storming the mosque, throwing Israeli flags everywhere. And they're being protected by the Israeli occupation forces. Now, this is, of course, a clear violation of what they're meant to be doing. They should be stopping these extremists. These extremists are going in there and stirring up trouble, basically. They're terrorists, basically. Because they want to, if you can't remember, the extremists in Israel, particularly the ones that are even to the right of the Zionists, want to demolish Al-Harim al-Sharif and build a new Jewish temple, because that was supposedly roughly around where the plaza was. Nothing remains of it today. It was destroyed by the Romans, I believe. All that remains of where it was is the Roman wall that surrounded, part of the Roman wall that surrounded the temple, and that's the Wailing Wall. So it was actually probably roughly where it's an important location for Muslims, Jews, and Christians. So it's a very hotly debated regions why it was earmarked to become its own city-state when the original blueprints were drawn up to break Palestine up. It was divided into three. It was divided into Palestine, Israel, and Jerusalem. Jerusalem being a city-state. Of course, that didn't happen when the Zionists went on their rampage following the pullout of Britain. When Britain left the area, the Zionist militants and terrorists just went in, grabbed everything they could, declared the city of Israel, and of course you had Jordan come in and grab the West Bank, Egypt come in and grab Gaza to stop the full annexation of Palestine into Israel. So it was a nice big mess. So they have the very idea of having Eurovision next year in what they think it will be Jerusalem. When you've got all that going on, I don't think it should happen. It should possibly even host it in the same city as it is this year. I didn't even look. And of course you have the last of all, the person doing their speech to win, saying this is for diversity. Israel is not diverse. In fact, Palestine is more diverse. If you go outside of Tel Aviv, which is, if they're going to host it anywhere, they should host it in the capital, Tel Aviv. if you go outside of Tel Aviv, the touristy areas, you'll find that there is gender segregation in Israel. You will find there is discrimination along gender, race, and sexual orientation. There's religious discrimination, and it's in segregation. So yeah, it's not a win for diversity. It's I'm not sure if that's just their ignorance, because I know that the Zionist government has enforced a curriculum in Israel that is basically, it's brainwashing. It tells them that they're the superior race, that the Arabs stole the land, which is not actually the case, and that that they've diverse, they're the best government, that they're a democracy, which they're actually not. Israel hasn't been a democracy. It's really never been a democracy. It's a theocracy. So you've got that. So I think personally they're going to host Eurovision next year. It should not be held in Israel, simply because of the fact that it's such a hot mess in there at the moment. It's not going to be safe. You've got the Israel trying to start World War III, and while Israel is a European colony, it's just not a good idea to go into that area right now. Now, a little less political, still on the topic, Michelle Wolfe I've been meaning to talk about. I've listened to her comedy piece she did at the that she did at the I can't think what it's called, the dinner. It'll come to me after I finish recording, I'm sure. There was nothing wrong with what she said. In fact, there was no comments about it. It's really just that the fact she called people out on the bullshit. Everything she said was true, and the most offensive thing she said was the fact that Flint, Michigan still does not have clean water. So I have to comment on that. If you haven't listened to her speech, listen to it. Everything she said was true. Something a bit more fun. Richard Spencer is broke. Richard Spencer, no money, got his credit card bounced for a coffee, which is great. This goes to show there's no money in hate. And along that line as well, we have got the Southern Poverty Law Centre. I was on there recently. Richard Spencer is listed as an extremist, a dangerous extremist, and they also have now added the alt-right and the men's right activist groups as being extremist movements. Now, I know this is going to cause the snowflakes on the alt-right pull their hair out and scream about how left-wing and bad the Southern Poverty Law Centre is. If you actually look at the site, you'll see that they list all the extremist movements, left and right. It's just that most extremist groups, including Muslim extremist groups, tend to be right-wing, because right-wing tends to be more motivated towards violence. And you have to remember that the most recent terrorist attacks in America have actually been perpetrated by people who are part of either the alt-right, the men's rights, or a combination thereof. So it is a major problem, and yes, these movements are extremist movements. They are dangerous. And of course I have to say that people like Sargon, Bering, all their ilk are enablers. Even Alex Jones, God, he's even against the Iran war, pulling out of the Iran deal. But if this is just, it just goes to show that I don't think people realise just how dangerous these organisations, these groups are. And of course you've got hypocrisy. I mean, we just had the protest in Britain. I can't even remember what it was called. I don't really care, but about how they protest for free speech. That figure what it was. So it's their protest against the fact their speech is being restricted. If your speech was being restricted, you wouldn't have been able to protest and not where you were. And as it was, most of it was all anti-Islam rhetoric anyway. So it wasn't a protest for free speech. It was a, here's our hate rhetoric. It's got to be worth pointing out that on several occasions there's been audits on who's getting their stuff restricted, who's having their free speech restricted. For example, I think it was at, can't figure what they were, there was a, recently did a talk about Facebook and how certain groups are getting blocked and all that, and the right are going on about how they're the ones getting attacked, they're the ones getting limited, to the point that now Facebook has brought a right winger on to look into it. No left, no balance, just the right. But audits have actually found that left and right is being censored, or not so much censored, but being demonetized, being removed at equal amounts. The difference being that the right screams louder about it. It's the same with YouTube. The left and the right are both equally being demonetized. I've been demonetized, for example, but even the Young Turks have had a lot of their stuff demonetized. And don't even start on Jimmy Dore. They've come after him recently too. A lot of his stuff's been demonetized. But the right scream louder about it. The left just go, meh, what can you do? YouTube's got their hand tied. And the right's like, oh my god, we're being censored. So yeah, there's that. I think if you want to know a group that is actually actively having their free speech taken away, you need to look into certain countries. China, for example. Good luck posting anywhere. The speech is restricted in China by the government. You've got countries where the government is coming down and actively shutting down media and putting journalists and people in jail for anything that's counter to the state. That's censorship. Anyone that speaks ill of Vladimir Putin will disappear. I mean, there's one amazing journalist over there who actually had a Putin supporter break into her radio station while she was broadcasting and slit her throat. Now, not only did she thankfully recover, but she actually, as soon as she could get up again, went to a press conference and asked Vladimir Putin a question with the scar and still showing on her neck. Now that is courage. But yes, so that's against free speech. And then, of course, you've got the poor Palestinians coming back around who actively have their channels, their Facebooks, and one of them, people even have their entire Google accounts shut down because they're Palestinians. If you report what's going on in Palestine, if you're a Palestinian journalist or media, if you're just doing the news, this is what's going on, you will have your stuff deleted. There was one journalist who, he's not even, he just went in, he's even asking Israelis, doing interviews with Israelis, he's going for the area, showing the reality on the ground, had his entire Google account deleted. He's claiming terms of service violations. Don't know what terms of service they're violating. They're not calling for extremism. They're not pushing for extremism. It's not propaganda. It's just on the ground. This is what is happening. This is the reality being shut down because, of course, Facebook has an office in Israel, and Google, of course, also has a lot of I mean, Bezos, Steve Bezos, for example, he's very supportive of Israel as well. And of course, talking about freedom on the internet, June 11th, 2018 is the death of internet freedom in America in particular. Now, what do I mean by that? I mean, that is the day that net neutrality dies. That is the day when the ISPs, your Comcast, Verizon, etc., get to slow down the websites that they choose, that they don't want you to go to, and speed up the ones they want you to go to. And they start saying to all the big guys, you want fast internet speeds on your website, you have to pay us money, so it's going to cost the consumer more. That is what's coming on June 11, 2018. They're calling it the Internet Freedom Act, but it's the Internet Anti-Freedom Act. So if you're in your business, if you've got a counter's website to what they want, they're going to slow you down. So you could say the internet freedom's going away there. Now, alright, I think I will leave that here for now. As I said, I want to do a video on the Aboriginal issues, but hopefully I won't be so long between videos next time, so I will catch you guys on the other side. So see you later, and keep on fighting.